Welcome to the Filmumentary's podcast. It's Jamie Benning here, talking to you as usual from my house here in southeast London. It's been really great to see so many of you around the world enjoying the podcast. Number 2 in Hong Kong at the moment, which is pretty cool, in film history, that is. I hope you enjoyed my last couple of episodes in February 2021, in which I spoke to Charles de Lauzarica and Bruce Wright about the Blade Runner work print story. Great little piece of cinema history in that episode. And in episode 19, in which I spoke to legendary production designer Joe Alves of Jaws and Close Encounters fame. This episode, number 20, I'm speaking with Gavin Rothery, director of Archive, which came out last year, 2020. Gavin also worked on Duncan Jones's Moon, visual effects supervisor. Archive is a really great achievement, and I'm sure that Gav is going to go on to bigger and better things. If you are a patron on Patreon, you get an exclusive video version of my interview with Gav, so do please go and check that out. You can see some of the science fiction memorabilia behind Gavin as I was talking to him. If you want to find out how to become a patron on Patreon, listen all the way to the end of the podcast and I'll give you some details about that. So here's my chat with Gavin Rothery, and I'll be back at the end for a bit more jabbering on. What I wanted to ask you, Gav, was what was the first film you saw growing up that caused you to think, hang on a minute, I want to do that?
Well, I never really had a film that made me do that. The thing that, when I look at my career trajectory, it's bounced all over the place. So I never kind of set out thinking, I want to do film, I've got to do film. Because, I grew up in Yorkshire in the 80s, and that stuff was so far out of reach that I never felt like I had a chance at ever doing any of that stuff anyway. So it honestly wasn't on my radar. My whole kind of hopes and dreams growing up was comics, because I grew up with 2000 AD, and that was my whole thing growing up. And I wanted to be a comic artist. So I spent all my time practicing to draw comics and making up comics with my friends. And it's weird. Well, my friends, like one friend in particular, my friend Steve Sag, who now I'm working on a film with. So it's funny how these things kind of come round. But I read this, what was it? It's something I heard on YouTube. And they said that they were talking about development of people, specifically artists and people that like create things. And they said that by the time you're 14 years old, you've basically locked in all the stuff that you love. Like, what you like when you're 14. And whatever you like when you're 14 will play out in some way throughout the rest of your life. And if you're in the business of creating things, that will, roll through in the way that your career plays out. And the more creative control you get, presumably the more that's visible. And for me, that was Aliens. Like 14 years old, watched Aliens. It changed my life. It was the first time I'd ever seen something that had everything I ever wanted in it. It had all the ingredients. Check. It was like if you did like a sort of a young Gav science fiction bingo. It's just full card. It's like it's all there. Like you can, you've won. So that film was hugely important to me. And from that point onwards, like all the comics I was trying to draw, everybody's got pulse rifles. Everybody looks like Colonial Marines. And then that was 85. And then a couple of years later, we had RoboCop and Predator. And so they started turning up in my comics. And so then it was like, hey, the aliens are fighting predators. Here comes RoboCop. And I've still got all this stuff in the garage. That was me as a kid, just drawing all this stuff. And so, I probably shouldn't be a huge surprise now that, sitting here now with you talking about this stuff. If I was talking about films that changed my life, it would be Aliens, but I didn't see that till I was 14. So it wasn't like I saw something as a tiny little kid. And but I was like, I've got to make films. I want to make films. Never really had that. There was something about Aliens that when you, particularly when you're younger, when you see something and you really love it, you kind of want to just be close to it and absorb all the information about it. And kind of, if you're a creator, like an artist or whatever, you want to replicate it, right? It's probably the same with musicians, I imagine. When you're younger and you first hear the Beatles, you probably start trying to write Beatles songs and things like that. I don't know. I imagine it's probably quite similar. But so for me, I basically just wanted to like climb inside James Cameron's brain and just live there. And that gave me more of an appreciation of like the original Terminator when that first dropped in 1984. It was only like a year before, but it didn't have the same magnitude when it dropped as Aliens did. So to be able to go back and then watch the Terminator and realize how awesome it was and properly appreciate it, and then followed by Terminator 2, and then just that whole period, James Cameron in the mid-80s.
What a time to grow up, hey? I mean, I was there with you along the way, What a time, bloody hell.
Yeah, I mean, what do we have now, right? If you're 14 now, like today, you're 14 years old. What's doing that to your brain? What's getting in there and staying there? I mean, I'm sure there's something, but I don't even know what that is right now. Presumably, it's in gaming. I mean, it's probably things like The Last of Us, or it's particularly the first one. Maybe things like Ghost of Tsushima or something. I mean, these things that get in there and just stay there. So maybe if we're lucky in like 20, 25 years, we'll be like pensioners, and there'll be all these like younger guys making the samurai films, and they'll be talking about how Ghost of Tsushima was the thing that they saw that just like, I've got to do this. But yeah, I think it's all changed now because games are just so good. I mean, back when we were kids, like games were, we were playing on the ZX Spectrum. We're playing things like, Rebel Star and, Spectrum games, basically 8-bit, early 8-bit stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess with comics,
I've forgotten what your question was.
It was just about the film. You answered it. Yeah, I'm thinking that the comics were just accessible to you, I guess, in that you had a skill for drawing, and you thought, I can do that, and I can jump into that world via that kind of medium. Yeah, it's different for me because I think living down here in London, I was always aware that like Star Wars was shot at Elstree, and
that must have been magical.
And I used to go to the studios. I used to just sort of go and drive by them with my dad, and just go, oh my God, that's where they made that thing. Just thought that there was this magical world on the other side of the fence. Comics weren't.
Well, weirdly enough, like, because I was always striving for that kind of connection because I never had it. And I found out in subsequent years that, because I grew up in a little town called Elland in West Yorkshire, right? It's a little town. It's hard to describe because there isn't like New Swift fire extinguishers had their original factory there. That's all there kind of is to really say about putting it on a map. It's like a nice little Yorkshire town. It's just one of those things where there isn't really a thing you can put a pin on and say, yeah, that's Elland. So I didn't have that whole kind of connection, like, going to a film studio when I was a kid. I couldn't even imagine that ever being a thing, But I found out in subsequent years, in Aliens, when Ripley's in the power loader fighting the Queen Alien, she's got there was like a power lift to do behind her built into the suit, and the suit was like, the suit itself was like a lot of like vacuum plastic painted up, and there was a guy like basically cuddling Sigourney Weaver from behind, like, what an awesome job. And he's like walking the suit, and they were like, he's like taking his cues off her movements and feeling her leg movement. He was like connected by the suit, and and that whole thing was just awesome. Finding out how they did it blew my mind as a kid. But what I didn't realize is I had a friend, because it's not a big place, Elland, and I had a friend I went to school with, and her parents had like a farm at the bottom of town, and there was a little bit at the bottom of the town, and there was like a little clump of like 5 or 6 farms next to each other. And the guy, her farming next door neighbor who had adjoining fields, he was the guy who was inside the power loader.
No way.
And if I'd have known that as a kid, I'd be round there, like, just, knocking on his door, wanting to talk about aliens, trying to kind of get closer to it somehow.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that the guy that was in the power loader, like, just lived, like, down the street.
That's very cool. I've heard that story before about that guy. As you say, what a job, And that's the thing, isn't it? Talking to these people, as I have done on this podcast and in my other projects, just... It's about trying to have that connection to those films that I love, And I think what you've done is you've managed to sort of translate all of that love into your own films, which I think is even more awesome. I mean, I will have introduced you, of course, as somebody who worked on Moon and did the production design and visual effects, and was very close in the development and the production and post-production and everything else about Moon. But can you just explain to the listeners how you ended up working with Duncan Jones and getting Sam Rockwell on board and making this? I think it's a fantastic movie. I watch it at least twice a year since it's come out.
Yeah, we did okay with Moon. It's cool that people took it to their hearts like they did. I mean, you don't know that when you're making it, but you're just trying as hard as you can to make something with some value. So it means a lot that people responded to Moon and still kind of hold it in high regard. It's cool because we had no money when we were making that film. I mean, what happened with me and Duncan getting together is we used to work together at a games company in the late 90s, and it was run by and owned by a chap called Demis Hassabis, who then went off in subsequent years to create DeepMind, which created the AlphaGo software that beat the world champion at the board game Go. So that was Demis. So it's actually Demis's fault that, I mean, now he's like, with Google and stuff, but it's Demis's fault that me and Duncan met, because I was on the art team and Duncan came in as a writer. And we met at the games company, and he wanted to make films. He just finished film school and he wanted to be a director. And I was working as an artist in a games company, but always trying to do what I can to level up my art. And this is back in like the late 90s, when the runtime environments for games were like infinitely more primitive than they are now. Like, you're making PS1 generation characters out of 250 polygons, things like that. So I was always I was working with 3D software. I was using 3D Studio Max, and it had all these powerful high-end functions in it that I never needed. And I used to play with them all the time because, it was cool and do all these cool graphics. And I was just mucking about at home doing things. And so, yeah, working with Duncan, like just mucking about on things basically, was just, firstly, it was a way for me to have a good reason to work with all the more powerful tools and just level up. And so we ended up moving in together so we could just work on stuff all the time. And then we both ended up going freelance. So we would basically do freelance jobs to pay our bills, and then just spend the rest of our time trying to make a film, basically. So we just teamed up. Excuse me. So, he was trying to get established as a director, and it's hard for anybody, no matter when they do it. But it was just endless pitches for things, for like low budget or zero budget music promos, and they'd send you a track, and Duncan would write, but we'd talk about it, we'd come up with some ideas. I might do a bit of artwork to support it, put a treatment together, we'd submit it, and it was just pass. We had about, like, I don't know, I think it was 48 straight rejections. And it was just like, I remember we were both pulling our hair out, and it was like, is this ever going to change? Like, what is this whole thing? Because Duncan kept trying to make films, so all of his treatments were little stories, and the music people weren't really interested in that. They wanted like high concept visual stuff. And in the end, we started swinging it around towards that, and it started working, and we got some traction. But yeah, I remember up one night talking about this, and I was just saying, like, we need to stop trying to make a film every time somebody comes at us with a 3,000 quid music promo, because it's just not, no one wants that. We need to get a bit more high concept with stuff, and get more visual with it, and find another in. So yeah, we did that. We had some success with what was the track called? Groove Cutters. There's a really low budget promo we shot with a couple of girls fighting, and that ended up being remade into a commercial for French Connection for television years later. So basically, we got some traction, and we ended up doing working our way up. We were doing like test commercials, this, that, and the other, and we ended up getting to the point where we were doing like 250 grand television commercials, which is awesome. So yeah, and it was just like me and him working at home, really. He'd be writing things, I'd be doing a lot of artwork to kind of support pitch stuff. And then we started, he had a short film that he had to make to fully graduate from film school. So I was like, I made all the props, design stuff. We just talked about things all the time, put all of our ideas together. He'd go off and write stuff. It was just basically like a cycle of like cups of tea in the kitchen, back to our computers to work, cups of tea in the kitchen, and just doing that all the time. It's a good way of working. We got tons of stuff done, but on top of it all was always like, make a film, let's make a sci-fi film. And the more success we got, the more kind of energized we got that we were going to be able to pull it off one day if we just kept working, because we were seeing a trajectory change. So that was probably around the first time I started properly thinking about film in any real sense. I had, we're always talking about it, but you talk about things. We were talking about doing a game as well. I mean, we had a thing we were doing where we, at one point, we were talking to Lego, and we almost had we actually did have the opportunity. We turned it down, we passed on it, but we were all set to basically set up a game studio and do a game for Lego, and we ended up passing on it because we were like, if we stick at this film stuff, we might be able to crack it. So we were like, if we do this, we've got to fully commit to it, and it'll totally derail all the ideas we've got for film stuff. So we ended up backing away from that and fully pursue it. And it was one of those things where, you sort of say no, you're like, sorry, yeah, thank you, but we're not going to be doing that. And then you're just thinking, Jesus, so I just ruined my life. And you've got that stressful period of turning down something awesome and just feeling weird about it for a couple of months. So yeah, I've had a couple of those. They always feel weird, but the little voice tells you what to do. You got to listen to the little voice. So where am I now? So that got me thinking properly about film. And it always seemed so kind of far away, because fair enough, me and Duncan are like best friends living together in a house, putting all our ideas together. All of a sudden, these things are all happening. We're kind of shooting stuff every month or two. We're like, we're on sets all the time. Things are happening, but we're not, outside in Winnebagos with, sat there on a crane with megaphones and talking to Bruce Willis and stuff like that. That's not, that wasn't it at all. But you couldn't deny that something was happening, but it wasn't making films. And it still always seemed really elusive to me. And in 2003, I think it must have been, I had a really interesting sort of pivot in my kind of thinking, where a friend of mine saw an ad on the early internet. It must have been quite early internet back then. And it was before we had all the kind of forum culture and stuff that we have today, and the organization of fan bases and stuff. And it was just a little ad. I don't remember where I saw it. And it said, do you want to be a zombie in a film? And send us an email. So he calls me and he's like, I've seen this ad. We're going to be zombies in films. And we both grew up with the Romero films, like loved Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, totally into it. Saw this ad, we're like, yeah, of course we want to be zombies in films. So we answered the ad. And the whole thing was go along to went to Soho Laundry, I think it was in Soho, Chinese Laundry, whatever it's called in Soho. I can't remember what it's called. We went in there, there's like rooms you can hire out for stuff, and had a zombie audition. And it was like, okay, there's a whole bunch of people in a room, and there's 4 people sat behind a table, and they're like, okay, be a zombie, go. And everyone it was night, it was in a room with no windows. Everyone's just going, just like shambling around. And it was funny because you could see some people, and it's like, you're going for Bub. And it was like, Bub seemed a bit inappropriate because Bub's an intelligent zombie, relatively speaking. And Bub does his best stuff by himself, not in a room with other zombies. So I remember there's somebody who was doing a Bub. And I remember thinking, like, you're blowing it. Like, that's the wrong zombie to go for. You want to go generic zombie, I'm going to eat your brains. Like, that's what you want right now. And he didn't get it. And his Bub was quite good, but he was like standing around looking at things and stuff. And I could see what he's doing, but it's like, nah. They're not looking for feature zombies here. They're looking for a bunch of people to be in a crowd. So I ended up getting it, and I was like, "Whoa, I passed an audition. There's a switch. Wasn't expecting that." So all of a sudden, me and my mate Ed were in a film. So we got an email through asking us to go out to New Cross for 4 or 5 days of night shoots, and at the time, I was running a team doing a bunch of outsourcing we were making the vehicles for the Xbox SKU of Grand Theft Auto 3. So it was quite a cool job we were doing. And I had like a little company that I'd set up, and I was running teams doing freelance jobs. I was pretty knackered. I'd been just in the grind for quite a while. So I left the whole thing with my mate Kev Duffy to run that, whilst I stepped out to have a little mini break and work on this film. So turned up for 4 days of night shoots, totally awesome. We're all there dressed as zombies. You turn up when it's still daylight, spend a couple of hours getting made up and just waiting. Then it gets dark, and you're on set and you're all shooting. And it turned out it's the space guys running around. And the film was Shaun of the Dead, but none of us knew what was going on back then. All we knew was like, oh look, cool, it's the space guys making a zombie film. That's awesome. And so I was on Shaun of the Dead as a zombie for a few days. And then at the time I had like short blonde hair, and I looked quite a lot like Simon. And I got pulled out of the crowd and asked to double for him. So I was like, yeah, cool. So then I ended up going down to Ealing Studios and doing a lot of stuff down there, and just basically, like standing in for Simon and just being right there in the middle of Shaun of the Dead being shot, like right next to the camera for like a few weeks. And it was brilliant. I'll tell you what, can I use a swear word?
Yeah, go for it, yeah.
Okay. It was fucking brilliant. That's what it was. It was amazing. Because, I'm all of a sudden I'm there right in the middle of this production. I mean, artistically contributing next to nothing, just standing where I'm told and doing what I'm told, and that's basically it. But just being in the middle of it and watching these people work, like, because being Duncan at that time, we had a couple of false starts trying to make a sci-fi film, but that was still our whole thing. And all of a sudden I'm on set of the space guys doing a zombie film, and you could tell when they were shooting it, there's something going on there. Like, I've been on a lot of sets, and some sets, they don't, the way I kind of categorize them, it's like you can have a day on set And it's always cool being on a set, because usually, there are like sets that have been built and there's actors in costume and stuff. But some of them, they're not equal. Like some sets are a lot better than other sets. And some sets really leave you with something in your head when you walk away. There's always interesting things going on, but some of them have just there's a thing about it and you're like, I want to see what that ends up looking like. And the pub stuff, when they were shooting all the pub stuff with the zombies coming in, and I had to do a load of standing stuff like holding the rifle and all that, and all that's cool fun. But doing all of that, you just knew that there was something going on there. Like that was going to be good. Like there was a thing happening there, and it looked like it was going to be good. So I was getting very excited about that. And every day I'd come home and I'd talk to Duncan about what would be going on that day. And I remember he was quite jealous about it because he was just at home and I'm off, on the Space Guy zombie film. But it was amazing, and it just watching those guys work, it demystified a lot for me. I've basically spent my whole career having things demystified, but just watching like Edgar and Simon like talking about things next to the camera whilst they're working out a scene, it was just so like reasonable what they were doing, like because they're just a pair of very intelligent, highly creative people that work creatively at a very high level, just having very kind of blunt conversations with each other. And those really good creative conversations where people aren't shy about just being quiet for a minute whilst they think about what they want to say, and it's not awkward. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Seeing all of that going on was it was very cool. Very inspiring, really inspiring.
Yeah, it gave you the sort of impetus to think I could be in that position, in the future.
Not really, because I still wasn't thinking like that. What it was, I was watching them talk and I was thinking, this is how me and Duncan talk about stuff. There isn't some witchcraft going on here. There isn't some unknown element. Like there are a couple of guys that have totally got their heads in the moment, problem solving, like on the feet. And it was just, it's what, I mean, anybody who's worked on any production has probably got experience of doing that. And watching these guys do it was cool because it was like, okay, yeah, it's not like they're doing some magical stuff that we don't know about. It's like, I mean, what they're doing was like awesome. It was all very well planned and very well executed. But I understood it all. I could see what was going on. You see the makeup queue, you've been in the makeup queue, you've all been made up. You can see it all. You know how to build the sets. You know what's going on. Like you can see what's happening. You understand the timescales things take. You're watching the machine move, and it was just super cool being right in the middle of it. And I mean, I was just there working as a stand-in in the middle of it all. So what was really cool was that I could just observe, like, as long as I was listening to my radio and I was where I needed to be when I needed to be, I could just observe everything, which is a kind of luxury you don't normally get when you're working, because normally you've got your tunnel vision on to some degree and you kind of bring your head up now and again and look around and then you're back in again. Whereas with this, I was just like, I was almost like a tourist. It was great.
Yeah, that sounds like an awesome experience. And then you kind of start developing Moon with Duncan over these coffees in the kitchen and just kind of, throwing ideas in and just, I guess each of these projects that you've worked on, whether it's a game or whether it's a film or your short film, you have to come up with like a little kernel of an idea, don't you, initially?
Yeah.
What was the sort of jumping off point for Moon?
Moon came together really through a realistic appraisal of our situation and trying to manage expectations. Because what happens is ambition is a very natural thing for anyone in any creative field, and your ambition comes in all by itself. So I find with this stuff, you don't really need to worry about being ambitious. What I find is if you start with something doable, then the ambition will kind of balloon. It's almost like if you imagine you've got a fish tank and a balloon, a big balloon, and you were blowing up the balloon and you wanted to make it as big as you could. If you just blow up the balloon and stop blowing it, you'll just have a big balloon. But if it's like in a fish tank, if you blow it up, it'll like fill out all the corners and like max it all out. Just kind of think of it like that, where sci-fi films, like one of the original things we got going on early on, it was going to cost like over $100 million. And I think when everybody starts making film, they're kind of naive enough to think that that's reasonable. Like you walk in as a nobody with a bunch of nice artwork and you just think someone's going to give you a load of money because they're going to buy into it. It just doesn't happen like that. Like you've got to prove yourself first. I mean, understand that now, of course, but yeah, we didn't understand that at the time, really. And we were pulling our hair out. We'd had a couple of false. I remember this really well. It was me and Duncan. We were in the lounge of the flat. We moved into another house, and we had like a more creative kind of hub thing going on. And yeah, we were just really, really pissed off. We were really down about it. This must have been like 2005, maybe. Yeah, it must have been like maybe mid to late 2005. And we were just like, this is never going. What we're going to do? How's this going to work? Like, how's this? You know, what we're doing wrong? It's just not going to work. This whole thing's like, we're just having a real down moment. And basically, we just sat there and we were like, you know what? What can we get? Like, we've done some stuff. We know some people. You know, what can we get? Let's figure out what we can get, and we'll make something for that. And we'll just try as hard as we can. But we can move forwards. Like, we're not going to be in this, because it almost feels like I'm sure anyone who's trying to get films made will kind of get this. You know, like sharks can only breathe when they move. You know, it's like if you hold a shark still in the water, apparently they suffocate because they need the movement through the water over the gills to be able to extract the oxygen and breathe. So I always felt like that, like when you're really trying to make something, like things have to move, because the feeling of just nothing happening is just suffocating. And that's what we felt like. And it can be quite bad for your creativity too, because it's probably the time you need to be the most creative, and it's probably the time you feel the least creative. So, you know, fortunately, we were just too stupid to not give up. So we just kept at it. And I mean, at the end of the day, the rationale behind it was always so how I always felt as a comic artist when I was a kid. You know, I was growing up in Yorkshire, I wanted to be a comic artist, and everybody at school was trying to talk me out of it, like the careers teachers, all the tutors and stuff, teachers. And they were like, well, it's impossible being a comic artist. And you know, how many people work as a comic artist? It's like virtually impossible. Just give up. Like, they just wanted numbers. I mean, I get it. Like, they wanted pupils in jobs. And the local big employer was the Halifax Building Society, and it hoovered up anybody with A-levels in any nearby school. So they were like, okay, what you want to do is either go to the Halifax Building Society, or I was in the Air Cadets and I was doing some flying and stuff. And they were like, okay, RAF, Halifax Building Society. Good, that's you done. You know, next child. And I was like, no, I want to draw comics. And I remember getting into all kinds of, I remember in the end, I stopped, we're supposed to have these little meetings, and I stopped going to them because they just weren't listening to me. And I was like, there's nothing to talk about. You know, we've had like 3 or 4 career meetings. They keep saying the same stuff, not into it. Unfortunately, my mum and dad were like, because I just used to draw comics all the time at home. And my mum and dad saw this, and they believed enough in me to say, look, if you want to go to art school, if you can get yourself in with a portfolio, you can live here and we'll support you whilst you go to art school, because there's a really good course in Leeds, which was like on a trainable. So they were like, you know, I was like, okay, cool. I got my mum and dad on board. Like, screw these careers, guys. It doesn't matter. So my rationale was that every week I read 2000 AD. Like, they've got loads of artists working there, like, and they're rotating, and there's new artists coming in all the time. Like, must be possible. It must be. And I'm just not accepting the fact these guys are telling me it's bollocks. It's like, if it really, really is impossible, I'll find out myself when the editor from 2000 AD just tells me to flat out fuck off, stop sending in submissions, and go and die in a fire. Then I'll maybe accept that it's impossible. But until that point, I'm gonna try and be a comic artist. So that was, I don't know. I'm not saying this is good advice necessarily, but it just, other people all over the world achieve difficult things every day. If you think directing a film is like an impossible feat, like, I mean, it's not easy. Don't get me wrong, it's not easy. But my rationale for that is that every day, all over the world, people are directing films. Now, am I so special and so unique that I must be excluded from the possibility of ever achieving that? Do you know what I mean? Because I would have to be such a unique snowflake to not have the slightest chance of accomplishing what literally tens of thousands of other people accomplish every day all over the world. Do you know what I mean? So that was the thing that kind of kept the light on for me. I've always kind of had that as it's like, other people do it. So if I definitely can't, whilst I'm working all the time to try and do it, if I'm definitely not able to do that, then that puts me in my own special bracket somehow. Do you know what I mean? With even bigger odds. So yeah, I've always just kind of framed it like that. And it's always just kind of kept me at it, really. Which, like I say, I'm not saying this is like ideal career advice, but that's what I did, and I don't regret that. I mean, I can't say that would necessarily apply to everybody, but I seem to have figured it out just by, just grinding and not giving up, basically.
Everybody I've spoken to that's been in the film industry, whether it's Paul Hirsch, who edited Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, and Ferris Bueller, or Evil Powell, who produced Alien and Blade Runner, or Robert Watts, who was the producer for Lucas, all of them have said they've had a little bit of luck, lots of passion, and just this bloody mindedness, this kind of tenacity to just, no, I am going to fucking do this. This is what I want to do.
And the
all
luck's
of them
important.
Yeah,
luck's important because, half of everything really is luck. And you know what? If you get some luck, good for you. Take it. Don't feel bad. Don't and ah over it. Take it and push it forwards. Nothing to feel bad about. Because if you're trying to do something for a long time, the time will usually give you some luck at some point. You have bad luck too, of course, and that's why you shouldn't really get down about it, because it's just the universe playing its numbers game. But if you can stay in the running and keep going at it, sooner or later you'll have some luck.
How do you manage that kind of up and down? Because I guess with, if we take the example of a film like Moon, you're trying to get it off the ground. You're having difficulties in doing so. You get Sam Rockwell on board. I'm not sure the timeline of this, Gav, but you have money, then you run out of money, and then you have these massive highs and these massive lows. What do you do to sort of try and stay on the level?
Yeah, this was a big thing for me actually, because I could feel my emotions swinging around, and I understand that's not a good thing to go through, because it's almost like when you accept praise. It's nice, but you can't soak it all the way in, because if you do, it means that if somebody says something negative about you, then that's going to soak all the way in. So my take on it is that I know that I'm working as hard as I can on whatever I'm doing, and I can explain why I did what I did if I need to, and I can defend my artistic decisions. And it's all thought about. It's all, it all comes from some kind of a plan that I'm rolling out. Like when I'm working on jobs, I know why I'm making the decisions I'm making. And so beyond that, there's obviously a matter of taste. Like not everything's going to be to everybody's taste. And so there's nothing you can do about that. Like, I'm going to try as hard as I can on my work, but there's going to be some people out there that'll think that everything I do is just trash, just through the mechanics of the universe again, and how it all works, like taste. But there'll be some other people out there that'll think it's cool. What can I tell you? It's like, it's the same for everybody. If you're writing a song, like whatever you're doing, you write a song, someone listens to it and goes, yeah, it's boring. It doesn't necessarily mean your song is boring. It means they found it boring for whatever reason. They might have been watching TV whilst they were listening to it. It could be it could be anything. Just, it doesn't mean that that's necessarily the right thing. And conversely, when someone comes up to you and says, that's the best song I've ever heard in my entire life, it's the best song anyone's ever written, cool that you enjoy it, but you can't then sort of inwardly think, I've written the best song anybody's ever written. That will seem to be a mistake, right?
Yeah.
And so
fatal error.
I felt this when we were doing Moon, because we had 4 times on the production when we ran out of money. And when I say run out of money, I mean, if a check doesn't clear in the morning, everything's getting put in a skip and we're all going home. We had that 4 times. That stuff really messes with your emotions, because it's like, we're on, it's gone, it's all in the trash, it's all in the skip, we're on, we're saved. And that stuff can really mess with you. So what how I dealt with that was basically taking control of my emotions is what I did. I consciously, when something happened, and it's difficult because you're in a room with people jumping up and down like punching the air, like when you get saved. And I deliberately made it my mental business and my mental health to not jump in the air and punch, jump up and down, punch the air, because it might all be in the bin again tomorrow, and then it might get saved again the day after that. And so what I did was just kept focus on the work. I knew that I had my own corner and I could do everything I could to support that. The broader side of things, like, hey, we've run out of money, we need some finance, I can't do anything about that. So it's almost like the universe is grinding its own cogs. I'm talking about universe a lot today. And there's not much I can do about that. I can keep my own corner up and do what I can to keep everybody's spirits up around me. And just try and be that guy that is just like, I want to say try and be the Rock. It's not quite what I mean. I guess it is kind of what I mean, but I don't really see myself like that. But I was just trying to not be the one who ever gets excessively happy or ever gets excessively down. And this was a conscious thing that I spent quite a bit of time working on to be able to do this. And the reason how I achieved it was by looking at the broader context of everything that we'd done. And it was like, we're still here, we're still going to be here tomorrow. Whatever happens, okay, supposing the worst thing does happen and the film goes down, we're all healthy, our brains are still working, we've learned loads through the we can figure it out. And it was just about having faith in ourselves that we would be able to figure something out no matter what. Even if it was a setback and something really bad happened, we'll figure it out. We'll take a deep breath, we'll go and have a sandwich, we'll sort it out. We've got this far by sorting things out, sorting ourselves out. We can do that in the future, continue to do that. So what I found was over time it worked, and I found that I'm now able to do this. And I've been through this with the release of Archive. You get a good review, and it's like, the first review I ever saw was like a 10 stars, and I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. Second review was 4 out of 5. So straight away I'm averaging it, going, okay, if I average that out, that's a 10 out of 10 and an 8 out of 10. That gives us a 9. All right. And then you read another one and someone doesn't like it, and they give you give you like a 3 star out of 5 or something, and that's a bad review all of a sudden, and you're like, shit, I'm flipping, my average is slipping, oh my god, my world's falling apart, this whole thing's fucked. And I can't have that. I can't have myself thinking like that. But it's the first thing that happens. Like, these thoughts come into your brain, then you got to push them out, box them up, deal with them, parcel it up with a little bow on it and shove it in the mail, and make sure it's all contextualized. So I can actually do that now, which is it's cool. But there's a kind of a side effect to that, which is you never really get the big highs of a super awesome cool thing happening. You don't get that euphoric lift, because I've kind of drilled that out of myself. But I also don't get the plummeting lows that come from some, like when I'm working, like some sudden bad news. I'm able to maintain a steady through line, which is really important. And I did have a couple of times on Archive where people are like, I'd have thought that would have spun you out. And it's like, look, we'll just figure it out. And it's because I've been training myself to do this for the last 10 years now, and I can do it. But what it does do is it replaces those like euphoric highs with a nice, cozy, warm glow, which stays for a lot longer, which now I've experienced that, I'll take that any day of the week. Like a nice, satisfying warm glow. It's like leaning next to a radiator on a cold day in front of a window.
Oh, yeah. That's a great approach to take. That's like CBT kind of level of reaction, where you take that internal conversation you have with yourself and actually acknowledge it and answer it and tell it, no, I don't want that today. I want you to.
What's CBD?
Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
I think we're all capable of doing that, though. I think you've just got to. I mean, my thing that I did was just in the moment. You can have your blinkers on and a feeling in the moment, but if you look at the wider arc of how your journey is going, the things you pulled off, your trajectory, and all that stuff, that's how I just having faith in yourself, basically.
We're just about halfway through my chat with Gavin Rothery. We'll be back after these short messages.
Are you tired of pop culture podcasts where the hosts exist in a constant, blissful state of agreement? Well, fear not. Let me introduce you to the Chinstroker versus Punter podcast. Mike is an ex-film student with a penchant for David Lynch, and Paul is your man on the street who likes what he knows and knows what he likes. Join us fortnightly as we discuss what we've been watching from our own very different perspectives. You can find us at csvsp.libsyn.com. Chinstroker vs. Punter is a proud member of the Pod Syndicate family of podcasts.
Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
The Projection Booth is single-handedly the greatest film podcast you could ever listen to or could possibly want.
Top notch. 5 stars. This has quickly become one of my favorite film-related podcasts. Always interesting.
A completely unpretentious yet fully comprehensive look at films from all genres.
The Projection Booth podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
And now back to my chat with Gav. And having been through something like Moon, which was difficult, and films are difficult to make, as you said, full stop. But going through something like that, how much of that prepared you for what was to come with Archive, your first feature?
Well, all of it really, because I mean, myself and Duncan were just working on everything all the way through, and Moon was no different. Excuse me. So, you know, Moon was made with me and Duncan at home, basically. So I'd like design everything. We'd just be in our bedrooms with our computers, and we'd kind of meet in the kitchen or the lounge and then talk about stuff, go back to our bedrooms. So, you know, we're working out the story in the lounge. You know, I've got some ideas for some Moon-based stuff. I'm like, hey, come and have a look at this render. And it's just what it was just going backwards and forwards. So it was weird because my kind of role on Moon, it wasn't like a formal role where there's a job and I apply for a job and I get a job and then I've got a role and that's it. It was just me and Duncan just working on stuff like we always did. So I'd be like, oh, I'll do some graphics. I'll design a set. I'll do that. Okay, I'll do the graphics for the screens. That's fine. You know, blah, blah, blah. Oh, what do we need? I'll design some buggies. That's fine. I'll get that done. Oh, we need a robot. You know, it's just that. That's how it came together. It was like, oh, we need this. We need that. We need that. That'll be cool. And it sounds scrappy, but it was okay whilst it was scrappy because that was before we got in a production pipeline with a timescale. So that was when, before we'd got any money and before we were in, anything had been blocked in a calendar. Once you get to that stage, it's different. Like once you've got a studio booked and, you know, you're booking flights for your cast and all that kind of stuff and hotels and things, it's all very different then. You don't want to be scrappy at that point. But, you know, because we had such a long lead into it all, although when we got started on it, it all moved pretty quick. And I mean, most of the stuff that was in the film was the first version of stuff because I was just designing stuff and it was like, yeah, cool, here's my base. Yeah, cool, let's build it. It was all very straightforward, but it's because we knew each other and trusted each other really well, and we'd done so much stuff before. All this kind of, it was all pitch stuff. It was just pitch for all these promos and commercials and stuff. Just endless pitch work. So working on a film was almost kind of luxurious because you're just doing one thing and you can just kind of sit on it and get it right.
Mm. Yeah, I was listening to another interview you did where you were talking about being on the set on Moon, and you were just kind of walking around and just looking at the bits of the set that hadn't been shot on yet, and you were just kind of like dirtying them up with a bit of coffee.
Frantically trying to make them look any way possible better. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wondered how, like going on to Film Archive, where you're helming the project, how difficult was it for you to sort of relinquish some of those responsibilities to other people on the crew? Or or were you still involved?
But this comes up quite a lot. It's quite funny. I've heard this when I've been like doing interviews and press, but also just from friends, just saying like, because I do a bunch of different things, right? I do concept art, I do VFX work, I do graphic design, I do motion graphics, I do anything visual in between. You know, I'll build props and costumes and all sorts of stuff. So I just get in there and get stuff done. Basically, it's all kind of one job to me. It's all kind of the same thing. I'm using different tools, but it's all the same thing, like the same end goal, like the same job. So yeah, I had things even right back at the beginning. You know, I'm talking to my friends and they were like, doesn't it feel weird, like, you know, having somebody out in a shot archive in Budapest, like having somebody out there building your set when you're not, you know, or doing this or doing that, and it's like, no, it's totally fine. It's, you know, this is how these things work, right? I'm going to do everything. The thing is, I do a lot of stuff on archive for sure. Like I did what I did on Moon plus more on archive, and you know, you could say like, you know, should you have been doing all of that? Shouldn't you have just been directing? But again, it's all one job. I wasn't neglecting directorial duties to go and do some graphic design. You know, that's just like fun. So I'm in my hotel room at night, you know, I'll be out in Budapest on pre-production. I'll be in the studios all day. We'll be looking through the set, talking to people about props, this, that, and the other, you know, testing robot suits and stuff. Then I'll be back at home at night and I'll just open Photoshop and just put some music on and just do a lot of graphic design all night. You know, I know I've got it just how I want it. It's like nice and relaxing for me to do. Production doesn't have to pay for anything. You know, it's a total win-win. So, you know, it's up to you. When you're doing this stuff, it's up to you. You don't have to follow any rigid hierarchy or anything. It's up to you. I mean, for me, working as a director, you know, I do all these other things. Like I did the production design too, with another guy that I was working with. And I mean, what I really need is like a bunch of art directors underneath me with their own teams to build stuff. That's really the kind of optimal thing for me. I don't really need a production designer. I need a bunch of art directors. So I probably need like about 4 art directors underneath me, I think, with their own teams, depending on what I'm working on. But
and have you kind of strive to have a kind of filmmaking family, as it were? Like, you know, the people you work with on Archive, are they people that you want to take on to other projects?
Some are. I mean, it doesn't work out with everybody, but it's kind of frustrating because, you know, I expect a lot from people when I'm working with them. I expect a lot from myself, and I expect to deliver a lot. You know, I mean, we had a tiny budget for Archive. It was like, it's comparable to Moon. So the two films are very much comparable. Creatively too. I mean, I'm sure you'll see echoes of the Sarang base in the architecture in Archive. It's not coincidence. It's all very, very much on purpose. But you know, yeah, I'm trying to get on, and I work all the time and expect a lot from people. And some people are totally up for it. Some people are like up for the challenge. Some people are just naturally talented, and everything that they kind of wave the hand across is just wonderful, which is ace. And some people are just happy to have a day at work, which is totally fine. I'll never begrudge anybody that. But, you know, there might be times where stuff needs redoing because it's just not there yet, you know, and it's getting late in the day and it's really kind of getting time to go home, but we need this thing tomorrow. And then you start, you know, you never want to kind of get into that spot, but it's just inevitable on productions when you're trying to punch above your weight. You just end up in that position. And so, yeah, you know, you can't begrudge somebody if they're going to go home. But this is another reason why it's good for me to be able to do things myself, because as long as I've still got some time left, I can do things myself. So I was picking up even in post-production, I was picking up VFX shots and doing them at home and stuff like that. We run out of money in post. So I was doing a bunch of post-production at home and, yeah, all sorts of stuff.
But the other thing I was going to say was I got real end of Blade Runner tingles when they're in the car together in the DeLorean with the trees going by, and the music got a little bit Vangelis-y at one point.
Stephen Price is a genius.
It's great. Really good score, I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. No, Stephen Price is a legit genius. He's a keeper.
Yeah,
sure.
He's moving on to the next one. And did you, when you first heard the score, what was your thoughts? What was your reactions?
Well, honestly, when I heard that score, it was a really, really lovely memory hearing that score, because what happened was, I mean, when I met Stephen, I mean, Stephen won the Academy Award for the score for Gravity in 2014, right? So, you know, and he came onto the project like he wanted to do it. Like the way he came onto the project, he asked me if he could do it. Like, we had like zero budget for it all. And I have a really nice friend, Yannick Lovo, who he worked at ILM at the time, and he'd read the script because he's like a trusted friend. So, you know, I'd given him the script to read. And his kids, he has 2 girls, and Stephen's got 2 girls as well. And Stephen moved into the area, and the kids started going to the same school. And they had an assembly, and the teachers were saying, okay, you know, welcome our 2 new girls. Their daddy's, you know, won a big award and won an Oscar in films. And so Yannick's girls went home and said, hey, Dad, there's a couple of new girls at school, and their dad's like won an Oscar. So Yannick's ears pricked up, and he was like, oh yeah, who's this guy? Checked him out, and it was Stephen. So Yannick gave me a ring, and it was like, I can't believe Stephen Price's girls just joined our school. Would you mind if I gave him the script to Archive? You know, because you might get some interest from him, might be able to work with him. And I was like, yeah, man, totally. So Yannick basically made it his business to collect his kids from school for a few days and introduce himself to Stephen. Got chatting with him, asked if he wanted to read a script. So Stephen said yes, fortunately. So Stephen read the script, and it turns out he'd been doing all these like massive big studio films, and he wanted to do a lower budget indie sci-fi film where he could just run away with it. So he asked me if he could do it, and I was like, yeah, of course you can. That would be awesome. So yeah, Stephen actually asked me if he could do Archive, because I just got lucky, and what I'd written was what he wanted to do. So he'd been looking for something like that. So that was another luck thing. So that got Stephen on board. And I mean, there was a couple of like, we talked about it quite a bit, but I just really was prepared for him to just do his thing and just see what he did. So he basically just took the script, went off, and we kept in touch. He went out for beers a few times over the process of him writing, and he was just really happy with the way it was all going. But he didn't send us over any early stuff at all. We kept talking about it, and I was like, I don't know, do you want to send me over any stuff? And he was like, I just want to keep working on it for a bit. And I was like, normally that's my big thing. It's like I always want to see work in progress, but there's something about Stephen, like when you actually meet him and get to know him, you just trust him implicitly. So he was like the one person on the whole team of the project where I would be comfortable with him just keeping going and not sending me over any work in progress. Because the thing about that is that the way you get caught out with that is all jobs have got a deadline, right? You're making a film, you've got a deadline you've got to deliver for. So you come away from your shoot, then you're editing, you're in post-production. We had like a temp soundtrack that we slapped on to give things a bit of mood. My awesome editor, Adam Biskupski, very much another keeper. He put like a temp score to go listen to a bunch of stuff and had like a temp thing on to carry the mood. But Stephen was like, I'm probably going to just disregard this and do my own thing. I was like, yeah, man, whatever you got to do, you go for it. And so normally when somebody doesn't show work in progress, that's a big problem for me, because I've run enough teams in the past to know that quite often the way you get fucked on a job is, pardon my French, but that's what happens. You get fucked. What happens is whatever's going on. Say you're working on something and you've got to deliver it on a date. You don't get any work in progress, and it's a hard date. There's no way you're going to go past it. The danger is they'll just kind of blat out the work at the last minute, give it to you at the last possible second, so you've got no opportunity to say, hang on a minute, I need to change some stuff. It's like you take what you're given, out the door, done. And it's the one way you get screwed in this stuff. And it's the same with everything. I mean, people do it with, like, whether you're having a kitchen fitted or whatever you're doing. I mean, the thing about a film is you've got a hard deadline where you've got to deliver, and it's all contractual. You have to do that. Otherwise, there's all kinds of penalties and bad stuff happens for everybody. So, it would be, for example, if someone was going to like screw you with VFX, you just won't see any shots and they'll blast them all in the last 2 weeks or something. And you're like, we need to change stuff. It's like, too bad you can't. That's how you get fucked in post-production. So you have to see work in progress. It's the only way you know stuff's getting done. And I've been fucked enough in my career, pardon my French, but the word's just perfect for it, because that's what happens. You get fucked. And it can compromise the quality of the job and all kinds of stuff. And as a director, people look at the final result and they attach that as being your vision. And that's your job, is to make sure it is. And if you've got all these people doing all this important work and they're not giving you a chance to have any input or direct any of it, and it's like, there you go, you're out of time, it can't be your vision, it's their vision. It can't be anything else. Or even worse, usually when that kind of thing happens, they're just blasting out a load of shit and they don't have any vision. It's just a bunch of work they're grinding out. They're just making sausages on a machine, and that can really, really fuck you up, frankly. It'll ruin your film. I'm sure all kinds of productions have been ruined, or at least to some degree less, or a large degree less than they should have been, because a frustrated director and production team got fucked over by a last minute deliverable and not seeing work in progress and no opportunity to talk or redo things. Now, like I say, Stephen was like pretty much the only person on the production who I trusted work like that. And he said at the beginning, the reason why I trusted him was because he understands this. And he said to me right at the beginning, don't worry, I'm not going to fuck you by dropping a load of music at the end that we don't have any time to talk about. And I didn't even have to say that. He said it to me. And I was like, not only his reputation and just being a really lovely guy and just building my trust through getting to know him, but him saying that to me meant a lot, because he knows the position I'm in. And what he did was, we were working, and he was working for a long time before we got some work delivered, but he was writing music whilst we were shooting, and he'd been chipping away for a long time. So we were out in Norway. When we were shooting in Budapest, I didn't have a solution for the house at the time, because it was all going to be done in VFX. So all the stuff with the house and the waterfall, that was all originally going to be VFX. But when we got back, very quickly, it was clear that our VFX budget was tightening up in places, and it always happens. So I was like, look, is it going to be helpful if I get a bunch of plates shot for this? Because I think it will. And they were like, yeah. So I was like, all right. So it was a toss-up between Iceland or Norway, and we're watching the weather maps. Myself, producer Phil Hurd, and my editor Adam Biskupski ended up going out to Norway for 3 days. I took my drone, and Phil was driving us around in a hire car. and we're just going to all. We found I was looking in the ads found it editor. He was using a stand-in clip from YouTube with a waterfall with like a plateau that he'd found in a Norwegian video, tourist information video thing, a travel blogger video or something. And I saw that waterfall and I was like, let's just use that. You know, it's just awesome. We can CG the house in there. So there's a place called Manafossen in southern Norway. So we just jumped on an EasyJet flight, took my drone, Ads took his drone, went out and just flew drones for 3 days around Norway. And whilst we were out there traveling around, we went to Manafossen, shot the shit out of it, and had it all basically in the first half day. And we were there for 3 days. So we were like, well, let's just look on the tourist map, find any other waterfalls we can, and just go and shoot them because we're here. We've got the drones, we've got the batteries. Let's get it covered. So that's what we did. And whilst we were out there, Stephen dropped the music. First listened to the music. It was the first full run through. And yeah, we downloaded it and listened to it on an iPad in a car whilst we were driving across Norway, and basically watched the film in the car, plugged into the Bluetooth speakers in the car. So it sounded great. Yeah, it was so good. So that was the first time I heard any music, was in a hire car with Phil and Ads driving through Norway. So cool. And it just blew us away. We were just like, fuck, this is just awesome. I mean, it barely changed from there. The only real thing that changed was that he'd done his first pass with samples, and then we recorded some live instruments like cello and stuff. And I'm sure he did a bunch of other work like mixing all kinds of stuff, but he basically just pretty much nailed it straight away.
Yeah, nice that you could put that trust in him in an area that you don't have expertise in as such.
Yeah, I know what I like, but I'm not going to sit down and I'm not going to hover over his keyboard and start pressing keys. Do you know what I mean? It's like that's not the relationship I have with music. I need to really trust the people that I'm working with. Unfortunately, Mr. Stephen Price is somebody that you can trust.
There you go. Website address comes along the bottom of the screen right now.
Oh, he's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you say it's small budget, but it looks fantastic. I've watched it 2.5 times now. I didn't get around to finishing a third time. But I think it looks fantastic. The reason for that is I was doing a bit more research, and unfortunately my wife's just had a bit of surgery, so I'm sort of doing everything at the moment. But I will watch it that third time. What really struck me about it is, any good sci-fi that I kind of grew up on, whether it was in comics or whether it was in novels or films, it's always about the human character and the sort of human condition. And even your robot characters have got real personality. J1, I think, is just fantastic. It reminds me of, I work in the television industry, and it reminds me of some of those giant pieces of camera kit we used to have when I first started kind of 20 years ago, that have got all these kind of slightly rounded edges, but they're just big kind of beige boxes. And you do apply personality to these things. Where did you look for inspiration? Like, what was your inspiration for the robots in your film? Did you look back to the 70s and 80s? Yeah,
I always wanted people in suits, just because, firstly, we couldn't afford to do anything else. I can't afford like all CG robots and stuff. So if these robots have to be CG, they're not in the film, basically.
I had to check, I did have to check. Well,
that's cool. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was, after the first viewing, I thought, I think they're maybe 50-50 or something like that. And I had to look up and realised that they were all
there's bits of CG
suits
in there. I mean, I don't know if we're into spoilers or not, but J2 becomes partly CG towards the end of her story.
Yes.
And obviously J3's got quite a bit of CG in there.
Yeah. Yeah, J2's end of story. But that was wow, what a moment that was.
That's
really, it did, man. It did. Yeah, I was welling up a couple of times actually watching it. And I don't know, there's just something about sci-fi should always ask a question, shouldn't it? And you've asked that question about what would you do if you were in that situation? And that's what me as an audience member is thinking, like, Christ, if my wife died, would I want to have that opportunity? Would I seek that out?
I think the thing is about that, like what you said before about, stories about people. I feel the same about that. Like the most compelling sci-fi for me is when you take people and put them in some kind of sci-fi, use some kind of sci-fi conceit to put some kind of spin on something that you'd understand in your own life, and spin it off into some kind of futuristic scenario. So when I was putting the story together, I wanted to have I like sci-fi films with stakes that you can buy into, because so much sci-fi is about saving the earth and this, that, and the other, which is cool, but I like things that are a bit closer in. So I chose the themes of love and death, thinking that they're just fundamental aspects of the human condition, that we're all going to have experiences with them in some form or another. So if I write a story about love and death, everyone's going to be able to hook into that to some degree, you know. So hopefully it'll let me kind of catch people a little bit, pull them into the story. So the story was all written back in 2011. It was like a long time ago when I had that together. It just took a long time to get the film together. But so I set out to tell a story about love and death and loss. Replacement naturally came through as a theme, which I thought was quite interesting. Maybe that's the thing we're all really scared of, really deep inside.
Yeah, I think we probably are. I love that idea that something that could be created by human and artificial life that wants to take its own life, you know. I think that's a fascinating idea.
Well, that was the original nugget was that. I mean, you mentioned a thing before about how when you put in a project together, usually it comes from some idea, right? And what I kind of found now that I'm working as a writer, I've found that you can have an idea, but it's not necessarily a story. So the idea and story can be kind of separate. But the idea of a machine wanting to die was the original idea that kicked off the whole process. That was the first idea that I had. I write all my ideas down in my phone. So yeah, I've got this like in there from like 2011, October, I think 2011. Yeah, I was at home in my flat and I had a couple of, there's some weird power surge that happened. I don't know. Both my PCs died and I had a really awful time. I couldn't, I had to get the data retrieved and it cost a couple of £1,000 to get that done. It was bad. And the computers were just stone dead. Like they ended up getting recycled. Like I couldn't get them fixed. So whatever happened, it was pretty bad. And yeah, I was in the middle of a spring clean whilst I was doing that. It was on a weekend, it was on a Sunday. And I'd got to that awesome part of the spring clean where you've trashed your house, you know, where you've got to like make it messy before you can make it tidy again. I was in the peak mess. Then this thing happened and I was like, how was that? Computers are off. Everything just blinks off. And it's like, obviously. But anyway, bad. Couldn't do anything to fix it. Had to keep tidying up my house. I was just super pissed off. And I felt hard done to. I felt wronged. You know, I felt like this was being done to spite me. And I felt like my computers had killed themselves to spite me, just to give me a big problem, piss me off. And there's something about that idea that I liked that kind of lodged in my mind. And just kind of, because I had another conversation going with a production company who were asking me if I had anything I wanted to make into a film. So I was thinking about ideas for something that might be worth pursuing around that time anyway. So that was the idea, was what if, that quickly developed into the idea of what if you built a human equivalent AI machine, and as soon as you turned it on, it just killed itself, which then started to lead into a story, as in like, you know, why is that happening? How can you stop it? And so that was, for Archive, that was how the idea became the story. But the idea was, a machine wanting to die, wanting to kill existence. And that then manifests through all kinds of other things. Me taking that idea and that nugget of a story, trying to find a story around the themes of love and death. And I mean, you can see from there very quickly, it took about 6 weeks. It just kind of went ding, 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 ding. And the stories worked out. But then it took me another, however many, 9 years to get it shot and finished.
Wow, 9 years. When did you, what was the actual shooting period? How long did that take? You said it was out in Budapest, right?
Yeah, we were in Budapest. Let's see. We shot in a warehouse because you can't get any studios out there because all the streaming services have booked all the studios from now till infinity. So if you're lucky, you get a nice warehouse and you know, put up with that. What was it? 27 days? Yeah, I think it's 28 days. I'll say 28. And we had a contingency day we used, so yeah, 28 days.
And why Budapest? What was the attraction there?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the shooting location is determined by finance. So it's not like they come to me and say, hey, Gav, what country do you want to go to shoot your film? Well, that'd be awesome, but that doesn't happen. It's all to do with like tax incentives and breaks and things like that. Complicated mathematics and finance stuff that I don't want to get involved in, because that's why I have a producer. They can deal with all of that. You know, I'll keep myself focused on the creative stuff. But yeah, I was swinging into it. I mean, it all came together at the last minute. In the last kind of 6 weeks, I think it was, before we nailed Hungary as a country to shoot in, we went through about 7 different countries. It was there's Italy at one point, Belgium, South Africa, Melbourne in Australia was in at one point, which would have been a bit of a bitch for pre-production. But my girl was Australian, so we'd have made it work. Although I did have a thing I said I wanted to do to myself, to myself. A thing I wanted to do if we ended up shooting. If I ever get to shoot a film in Australia, I'm going to get myself an old 70s Ford Falcon, like the Mad Max car, and I want to do a little tour of the Mad Max locations in a Ford Falcon.
Nice.
But I never got to live that dream on this one.
Well, I mean, Budapest,
but yeah, it's all money.
Budapest is a pretty good second to Melbourne, I'd say. I've had some good times in both those cities over the years. Yeah, Budapest is top town. You finished the film in February 2020, is that right?
Yeah, just before the pandemic shut us down.
So fortunate. I mean, so lucky. I mean, obviously you would have liked a cinema release, but I guess in some ways, given that everybody's at home, kind of chewing their way through every bit of content they can,
finishing Netflix.
Yeah, like complete. Do you think, have you got any measure of the how many sets of eyes you've had on archive? Do you get that kind of information?
I get bits and pieces at certain periods in time. I know that everybody's happy. Excuse me. My only real main thing is like, are the finances happy? Because I'm proud of stuff. Like, we finished archive on time and under budget, right? For an ambitious film like it is, everyone was very happy when we delivered the film, which makes me happy because I just want to be a good schoolboy at the end of the day. It's all well and good working with all these business people, but I genuinely want them to be happy at the end of the day. And it's really cool when your financiers are like taking you out for a big meal and asking you what you're doing next and asking if they can be a part of it and all that stuff. It's really cool. It means a lot to me that, because I'm trying to do it right, and I don't think I'd be having those kind of conversations if I wasn't doing something right. So, I'll keep pushing that. But it means a lot to me that I know ultimately it's business and everybody's doing business, and the only reason why anyone's investing in like archive is because they think it represents a viable business opportunity. But even so, it still means a lot to me personally that they chose to support me and go with my thing, right? My pitch, my job, my creative endeavor. That still means a lot to me. So even though they're doing it looking at mathematical equations and balance sheets, it still means a lot to me personally,
Yeah, I can totally see that. And I would imagine, like, in the same way that, or a similar way that Moon opened up opportunities and doors, I would imagine that archive is now, because it's been seen by so many people and it's available on so many different platforms, that you are getting offers and you're getting, I'm assuming you have a representative that's kind of seeking out projects for you, and you're probably being
the fun part of our conversation where I can't tell you anything.
I bet.
Got loads. I got some great stuff going on right now. Wow, but I can't talk about it, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no worries.
No, I got signed by CAA out in LA, which are like they're like right at the top of the pile with the creative agencies out there. So they're awesome. I've got a couple of agents working for me out there representing me who are just great. I mean, and I have a UK agent too at Casaroto, who's just a lovely chap. And between the three of them, we've all been like combining forces. One of the things that has been good with the pandemic, an unexpected boon for my kind of career at the moment, which is like useful, and I'll take it as a win through luck, is everyone's accepted Zoom and video conferencing as the standard way of meeting now. So I've been able to do all my meets and greets in LA over Zoom. Now, it would have been cool to go out. Normally you'd go out to LA, you'd hang out there for a couple of weeks, rack up a load of meetings, go and have a load of nice lunches, a few drinks, which would have been great. And I will get around to doing that when this is all behind us and we can travel safely and everyone's healthy and good. But in the meantime, it's been really cool just getting plugged into LA over Zoom, because I've just been able to just have video conferences, and I've just got to meet everybody out there, which is just awesome. So yeah, I've got 5 projects I'm working on at the moment, which are all at various stages, which I can't talk about, but I've never been busier, never been more creatively stimulated, never been more excited, honestly, about the stuff that I'm hoping to be able to bring you to watch, hopefully.
Well, you absolutely deserve it, Gav. I'm really pleased that that's happened, because you really do deserve it. I think, your work on Moon was very inspirational for a lot of people, in the same way that, we were inspired by the people that worked on Alien. I always think,
it's nowhere near the same. Honestly, I appreciate what you're saying.
No, but listen, I can look at your stuff, and I can see a through line from, like Ron Cobb designing all of that stuff on Alien, and all the symbols for the doors and things, and just the way you've kind of analysed that, and you've pulled it apart, and you've rebuilt your own version of it. And I think that's fantastic that sort of legacy remains. And I think that the fact that you're just forging forward is fantastic, because, I've been aware of you on Twitter for, well, what do we think it is now, 12 years or something we've been on Twitter. I've followed what you're doing. And as soon as I saw that Archive was on the horizon, there was a little kind of, fist pump moment for you. I thought, oh, that's great. He's getting his own chance to do this. And I really hope you get to do like something, maybe a series. Who knows what one of these 5 projects is? I would love to see you do something longer form. I mean, do you find that an attractive prospect? Because obviously with a film, you've got that kind of 2-hour window to tell a story, and you have to have that certain efficiency. But with something longer form, you get that time to sort of let things play out and develop. Is that attractive?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about me particularly working creatively is that, because I've been working in the games industry since like 96. And I originally trained as an illustrator and a graphic designer, and wanted to do comics. So, excuse me, my background is as much in computer games as it is in film and advertising and sort of VFX. So yeah, I've got all these like miles of road behind me with all this stuff that I've done. And the thing is about games is it's all about world building. Like, that's what you're doing there, you're world building. And when you're making a game, the level of world building that you have to do in a game to nail it is so much greater than the level of world building you have to do in a production. Or it feels like that to me anyway. When you're making a game, you've got you can go anywhere, walk, and, you can explore. I mean, one of the things I love about games is traveling to the environments. It's one of the reasons why I love VR so much. It's just the experience of being to one of these like kind of fantastic places that never really existed. It's like Alien Isolation. I can wander around those ships endlessly. They're just beautiful. The environments are beautiful, but you've got to realize the entire thing in a game. Whereas in a film, in a movie, you've got the frame to deal with. And so I'm always thinking about the rest of the world, because that's the way I've been working for the last 25 years. That's my whole thing. So to be able to do that in film, it's funny because I've found people comment on it quite a lot. To me, it's just second nature, like the whole world building thing. But on sets, I'll have all these little things that I'm putting in there that are there for reasons that are outside the scope of the script. But, they're there for a good reason because of the broader context of the world. And it was so cool having people pick up on a lot of this stuff. And yeah, the world building thing is something that I'm really fond of. And for me, world building for film or for television is so much more luxurious than world building for games, because like I say, you've got the frame. And especially now I'm working as a writer, I can properly get things down. Like I can look at things like lore and things like that, and backstories and stuff, like, and I can really get into that. So what I'm trying to do at the moment with when I'm working on film projects, like 2 of them in particular that I'm working on, there's all this lore and backstory around them. So if they were, I'm pitching them as film projects and writing movie scripts, but there's also like a supplementary document which would outline how that would transfer to television if it was felt that was a way that anybody wanted to go. And because the worlds are all realized, there's all kinds of opportunities for exploration. So I'm not writing a bunch of TV episodes, but I'm just outlining things and hinting at where directions it could go off on, and how things that are in this film could sort of ping off into their own little timelines, or crossover, or bring other things in that are touched on in the movie that could be their own a much bigger thing in a longer format. So it's really fun to do. I mean, there's one in particular that I do, which is a sci-fi comedy, and I'm working on it with my old comic partner, a chap called Steve Tagg. Our whole creative process is basically us trying to make a compelling, awesome sci-fi story, but also just make each other laugh. I think this is the thing about work. there's a couple of different types of work, in my opinion, when you're working professionally, because, you know, if you're working in some artistic or creative field, that's cool. You know, it's probably something that comes from your youth that you were doing because you enjoyed it and were good at it, and, you know, all of that. But then when you start working professionally, you're in an industrial environment, and oftentimes you're not the one who, you're like at some point down a food chain and you're being told what to do and you're being briefed, and it's like, can you give us this, can you give us that? And so even though you're doing your own thing, you're kind of fighting to put your creativity into someone else's vision a lot of the time. So to get to the point where you're doing something and you're not doing that after doing that for a long time is really thrilling. And I find there's two types of work in your career when you're working professionally. There's a type of work that tires you out the more you work. And there's another type of work, which is usually the same thing, but maybe a different project, where the more you work, the more energized you get. So working hard on it actually gives you energy and gets you excited and gets you pumped. So one type of work drains you and leaves you ready for bed, and the other type of work just gets your brain spinning and leaves you all excited and kind of pumped for it. And so I've always, my kind of benchmark myself for when I'm trying to do one of my own projects is I have to get that pumped feeling when I'm working on it, rather than it feeling like any kind of a grind. There's always grind here and there, but it needs to be something where the more I work on it, the more excited I get about it. And probably one of the most fun, I mean, writing this script has just been fun the whole way through, but writing this other document to like sort of try and give a little bit of an outline as to what it might become if it were to become a series, on a TV series. It's just one of the most fun things I've ever written, just thinking about it, because we've got this cool little universe that we've built, and there's so much potential for it's so cool if they had, what if, anyway, I'll stop talking about all this stuff.
Yeah, you should.
I'll get all excited and blurt out what's going on.
That sounds great, though.
Ships.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I think, I'm sure everyone that's listening will, you know, wish you the best, Gav, because I think if you continue to make these projects at the improvement arc that you're on at the moment, like with everything you do, it just seems to get better and better, and I honestly wish you the best for these projects.
I appreciate that. Thanks, man.
It's I'll be watching with great interest, definitely. I hope you enjoyed my chat with director Gavin Rothery there. Do check out Archive, which is available to buy on all good streaming platforms. I really enjoyed it. It goes to show what can be achieved today with a micro budget, and the talent of Gavin and his team. Coming up on the podcast next time around is my interview with Patrick McClung. Pat worked on an incredible list of movies, including The Empire Strikes Back, Ghostbusters, Aliens, Die Hard, The Abyss, Apollo 13, True Lies. His particular area of expertise is miniature effects, so he helped build and detail a few things on Empire, ships in Aliens, buildings in Die Hard. He's seen so many changes in his industry, and it's really fascinating to get that kind of insight. That episode, number 21, will be out in a couple of weeks. I decided to keep it to just 2 episodes per month for the foreseeable future. After that, episode 22 will be with Ivor Powell, who worked as producer for Ridley Scott on a number of films. He started out in the industry on 2001, A Space Odyssey. Another fascinating man to be in the company of. I spent a day with him. I did create a video documentary film from this same material. This will be an extended version, though, in podcast format, giving a few more insights into Ivor's career, which is still continuing today. A huge thanks, as always, to my lovely patrons on Patreon. If you want to become part of the Filmumentary family and contribute $1 per episode, or maybe $1 per month, it would make a big difference to me and to the kind of podcasts that I can put out. If you can't afford to do that, just sit back and relax and enjoy these 20 episodes while quietly thanking the lovely patrons for contributing and enabling me to do this. I'd also really appreciate it if you could subscribe and leave a review, as that helps move the podcast up the charts and ultimately gets it to more ears. Thanks for joining me again, and I hope you return for episode 21 of the Filmumentaries podcast.